discovered that my parents hated me. We were in the Yellowstone National Park, 1953.
So you were 10?
50,
You were 10 when you discovered this?
1954, I was 10, not quite 11. And we're driving through the park, and there's bears there. And my dad, before we left for the trip, bought a brand new item called a Polaroid land camera, wherein, at that time, I think 3 minutes you could get a picture. We went to 60 seconds later, and you had to pull it out, and then you let it develop, and you peeled it apart, and you rubbed this wax coating over the top of it. So he hands me a cookie. He says, Bob, he says, go out there and feed that bear. I take the cookie, I open up the car door, they're all in the car. I take the cookie out, I go out, the bear comes up, I'm feeding the bear, my dad takes a picture from the car window.
From the car window.
From the car window. I come back and get in the car, and I don't mind telling you, I was a little shaky, right? And we're sitting there waiting for the picture to come out. He said, that didn't take, it gives me another. Well, that's one time I discovered my parents really didn't want me around. The other was, when I was about, I don't know, maybe 11, and I had a good friend in my class. I was best man at his wedding, he was best man at mine. We joined the Marines together. His name is Milton Hoffman. And Sonny would walk home from school, he lived south of us, and actually west of us, and he would get beat up almost every day by a couple boys who were around 14 or 15. And so finally I started walking home with him. Because I was a big kid at that age, but I was still 11 years old, but I was a bigger kid. And it worked really well because now they beat the two of us. So I came home, and I got a cut lip and I got a abrasion on my cheek. My mom says, what happened to you? I said, well, Sonny's been getting beaten up, and so I walked him home, and then he's kind of beat on us too. She grabbed me by the scruff of the neck. What did I do? She gets in the car, she drags me up to the grade school, Scruggs grade school, into the principal's office. She says, Mr. Hargett, she said, every day Bobby and Milton Hoffman are getting beat up by these boys. So I had enough of that. Now here's what I want you to do. I want you to go get Mr. Petusha, who was the manual training teacher. Get Mr. Petusha, get some boxing gloves, and I want Bobby to take them on one at a time down the gym. But then what she did is she put me in the Concordia Turner's Hall to learn boxing. And so I boxed at Concordia Turner's Hall when I was a kid. And I had to quit fighting because of my hands. The referee kept stepping on my fingers. But all kidding aside, Mom was not always an easy person to live with. Would that be a fair statement? She was not like me, all sweetness and light. I'm a lot like her. That's true. I have to admit it. I'm guilty.
That'll leave a mark.
More like my mother than my father, that's for sure. But Mom was a very strong person. Mom was a person who knew her own mind and usually knew everybody else's mind too. And was not afraid to stand up for what she believed was right, and always expected her children to stand up what they thought was right, no matter what the cost. And if you were convinced you were right and you stood up for what you felt was right, she would back you. I will say that. Mom would always back you. She was fiercely loyal to her family. She was fiercely loyal to her Lord. And growing up in the household that I grew up in has a lot of pleasant memories. Of my dad, my mom singing, of my sister playing. Our house was always an open house. We never knew from day to day growing up who would be sitting at the table with us for any meal. And we'd have people drop in for breakfast. The boys next door would come for breakfast. Your boyfriends.
Bob, Jerry, Dick.
Harry?
Bruce with his
Bruce, oh, Bruce. Yeah, a friend of mine now lives in the house.
Oh, yeah, Russ.
You're
Yeah,
kidding.
Rasmussen's house, yeah.
Oh,
Friend of ours. But anyway, it was a wonderful house to grow up in, filled with music. My dad was always fun. My dad liked pretty girls. He was a generous man. He was a man who would give $100 to somebody without thinking about it, but wouldn't pay $2 to walk a block to save walking 8 blocks in a bad neighborhood. He'd rather walk the 8 blocks and pay a buck to park next to the theater. You know, that's the kind of guy he was. But that's the Depression era people. And what a great generation that was. There's a reason why they call that the greatest generation. Those people went through the Depression. They went through the war. The men came back from the war and didn't complain. They rolled up their sleeves. They used the GI Bill. They got their college educations. They bought homes. They went to work. And they came back to a much different world than they left. Because that was really the beginning of the women's movement in this country. The women had to start working in the factories again. So it was a much different time. And it's a generation to be admired. Would that we were as good a generation as theirs. One memory I have, if I can get through without getting choked up, and I've told this to a lot of people, and I don't know if I could have told you this, but one of my fondest memories was laying on the floor under the piano where you play when I was a kid. Just the music, sitting there and listening to that was wonderful. It really was. And hearing my folks sing, it was a real experience, and I'm sure the older I get, the more I'll value the childhood I had at the house. I think we all do. We tend to be more introspective as we get older. Mom is in a better place. Pop, I'm sorry, you had 22 years of rest. Got to deal with it now, Pop. She was a great lady, and she will be missed. And in case you don't know it, you and I are now orphans.
We're the older generation.
We are that too.